swimming holes that the Mayan people believed to be portals to the underworld. That and more await in this episode about the Yucatan. That is the subject of today's Travel Lemming podcast. It also was our number one destination for our 2024 list of the best destinations to visit around the world. In addition to the Yucatan, we're also going to be discussing some very interesting perspective pieces, traveling in a group and the difficulties that come with that, as well as how to deal with airport anxiety. I'm your host, Betty Hurd, and this is the Travel Lemming Podcast. Today, I'm joined with my co-host, Nate Hake. Nate, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing okay. Looking forward to talking about Yucatan, Mexico, where I am right now. One of my favorite places in the world. I think everyone should travel here once, and not a lot of people do. So we'll get into that later. But first, I think let's go ahead and dive into our Travel Lemming Perspectives section. At travellemming.com/perspectives, we publish interesting perspectives from our team of dozens of local travel writers. We have lots of guides on Travel Lemming to destinations all around the world, but we also publish in the perspective section more of sort of our thought pieces, what we find interesting. And in this recurring segment, Betty and I share what we think are some of the more interesting perspective pieces that are going on the site. And you can find all of these at travellemming.com/perspectives or by just searching for whatever we're talking about plus the words Travel Lemming. First up, I'm going to be sharing an article from Sky about travel hacks, travel tips that she found made her trip to Japan better. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up on my screen for those of you who are watching us on YouTube. While I'm doing that, if you're listening, feel free to like and subscribe. We really do appreciate that. So Sky has this piece where she just talks about some of the things that she felt really made her trip to Japan easier. And I just went to Japan a month ago, so I thought I would share this because some of this really did resonate with me. First, she said to download Ubigi. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, but it's an application that you can use for an eSIM in Japan. eSIMs are great. If you don't know what they are, it's exactly what it sounds like. Instead of having a physical SIM, you just do it all on your phone. And what's so awesome about these is that you need to get it before you land, or you need to get Wi-Fi when you're there, but you're immediately connected. She says, get breakfast from 7-Eleven. If you haven't been to a 7-Eleven in Japan or Thailand or Asia generally, it is not like 7-Eleven in the US. It's a whole experience in itself, quite the destination. One thing she mentions that I thought was really cool was about luggage shipment services. And we did this when we were going from Osaka to Tokyo, because one problem in Japan is internally, the trains are really good for traveling. But if you have a lot of luggage, there are spaces for the bags, but it can be a little bit difficult, especially at the subways and things. Like Japan is this place where everything is very tightly packed together. But a solution that they have to this is pretty much across the entire country. You can ask your hotel to just ship your luggage onto future hotels. For example, when we went Osaka, Kyoto, Tokyo, and we shipped our largest bags on from Osaka to our final hotel in Tokyo. And we just carried like our carry-ons and the stuff that we needed for Kyoto with us. And it made the trip just a lot more convenient. And I think it was maybe like $25, something. She says $13 for bag is what it averages out for her. So I thought that was really cool. She's got a couple other ones on here, like how to use Google Translate's lens translation feature. Really helpful because in Japan, they have 3 written languages and it doesn't follow the same alphabet as us. And lastly, to bring like something to hold all the little coins in, because you get a ton of coins in Japan and they're really quite valuable. Like they have a 500 yen coin, which is $3 or $4. So you don't want to be throwing those away. You've been through Japan, right, Betty?
Yes.
Have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought that her article was really helpful. It was very unique to Japan, but also I think some of the things translate well to wherever you're going when it comes to downloading apps and handling your money well.
Yep. Okay, next up, the second one I got to share. This is from Leah Rose. So Leah Rose is one of our editors. She's based out of Chicago. And so she's, of course, biased, and she admits that in the piece. But she talks about why she thinks Chicago is the best major city in America. And most people would probably say New York or LA or maybe Miami, something like that. But she makes the case for Chicago. And what she says is, first off, she talks about Lake Michigan and how Lake Michigan is really a unique feature of Chicago because it's so big that you feel like you're on the ocean. It acts like the ocean. But you don't have sharks, you don't have salt to worry about. I have to say, I spent a lot of time on Lake Michigan beaches, and it is really nice in comparison to the ocean, a lot more tranquil, but it's such a big, like it's absolutely, you can't see out into the distance. It feels like you're on the ocean.
Right.
How Midwestern hospitality kind of makes things better as opposed to it's true in New York, people are not always the nicest. So totally get that. She talks about the way the Riverwalk and the way that the city is built to get around and how it has, later on, she talks about how you can walk, drive, bike, take public transit. And although other cities have those things, in Chicago, all of them, she says, are very well done. And she also talks about all the different sort of activities that they have there. And lastly, she addresses, of course, what I would say, if you ask me, I'd be like, Chicago, it's cold, right? And she addresses that. And she says, yes, but the summers make the winters worth it in her mind. She says, it's true that our winters can be cold, long, dreary, and frankly depressing, but our summers are unbeatable. The city may get hot, but we have cool, refreshing Lake Michigan at our fingertips. I get that LA and Miami are situated on beaches, but Chicago beaches don't have the salt or sharks to worry about. Our beaches also tend to be less crowded. And she just goes on to talk about why she thinks Chicago is the best city in America. This got a lot of people talking. Feel free to let us know in the comments what you think is the best city. Ultimately, it's a matter of perspective, right? And in all things in travel, like there are no right answers. But those are the two perspectives that stood out to me. How about you, Betty?
Yeah, and I love that Chicago one so much. I've only been to Chicago one time, but reading that again made me just really crave going back and actually experiencing it the way that Leah Rose described. So what I brought to the table today is first I have Ruthie's article on being an au pair. And I always thought that it would be so interesting to be an au pair.
What is an au pair?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually was wondering the same thing because it's something that I don't think a lot of people in the US use that term. At least I haven't heard a lot. It's basically like being a nanny. So you'll go to a foreign country and you live with a family in exchange for taking care of the kids and maybe even sometimes contributing to the work around the house and even teaching them a certain language. Sometimes it's like an exchange of your services for room and board. So she talks about doing this when she was just 18. And it's such an interesting piece, especially if you're someone who has thought about doing this and never got the chance to, like me.
She was an au pair in Spain and Germany. She's from Wales, by the way.
Yes, she's definitely lived a whole other life in those countries. So I thought that was really interesting. And also, for my next piece, I'm actually shouting myself out here. We're talking about how to overcome airport anxiety. So for me, as some of you may know, I'm a flight attendant. And even as someone who is constantly back and forth from the airports, I still get anxiety about travel. I think everybody gets that nervousness approaching a trip because it's just a totally different environment from what you typically are used to. So I just have 9 tips on just how to keep down that anxiety and keep the stress levels a little bit lower. From the simplest tip of just arriving to the airport early, all the way to, I think a lot of people don't know that there are actually yoga rooms in some of these. I know, and Nate's, if you're looking at the screen
In the airports, you mean?
There's yoga rooms in the airports.
Okay.
So those are actually really helpful, and no one's ever in them. So whenever I'm in San Francisco, they have one in each terminal. And I'm always the only one in there. And you would think that it's like a silly concept, but really, if you're stressing out or if you just have time to kill and you're anxious about your travels, there's a lot of really great ways that you can manage that while you're traveling. And then finally, my last perspective was Leah Rose's piece on group travel. I don't know about you, Nate, but I don't really like traveling with other people, mostly because I think I have a very particular way of doing it. And I think when you travel with other personalities and everybody has their own opinions on where's the best place to eat, what's the best thing to do, how are we going to get from point A to point B, it can get really complicated. So Leah Rose has some really great ideas about just how to work together, mesh all those different personalities, and also prioritizing time to yourself, no matter where you travel. So I really appreciated all of her tips on how to make the most of a trip with more than just yourself.
And she's saying, if you read the article, she talks about create a well-organized itinerary, be sure to plan so everyone can agree on what you're doing, plan activities in the morning and leave your afternoons free. So when people are feeling a little tired, leave some looseness in your itinerary so people have the ability to kind of go their own way. Most important, communicate with other folks, agree on payment. That's a common source of stress. Everybody has different budgets. And what's expensive for somebody is like a must do to somebody else.
Yeah.
And that can definitely cause a lot of stress. And so you want to be sensitive to that if you're traveling with other people. But one of the benefits of traveling with a group, because by having a group, you're splitting costs, you're sharing costs, and that
Yeah.
tends to bring down the price of it. She says, create a shared photo album. That's great. So that you can just put stuff in there. I find airdrop is hard. If you take as many photos as I do, hundreds per day, it doesn't quite work. And she's like, make sure that you take your alone time and all that. So yeah, I thought, as always, a great perspective piece by Leah Rose.
For our next segment, we're going to be talking about the Yucatan. And our founder, Nate, is currently there. And that's one of the reasons we want to discuss this location today. It also was our top destination on our list of the best places to travel in 2024. Now, every year, this is our collaborative effort with all the Travel Lemming creators. There's dozens of us. And this is probably our biggest article of the year. So in 2024, number one was the Yucatan. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull up this article right now. And I'm going to read just a little excerpt of it that Nate wrote. It says, escape Cancun on the Maya train to colorfully authentic Mexican towns, discover beaches free of tourists and seaweed, ancient pyramids, and underground swimming holes the Mayans believed were gateways to the underworld. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff there just in that little blurb. Nate, tell us a little bit more about why you chose the Yucatan for this incredible article that we have.
Yeah, I think so. For folks who haven't been to Mexico or who have been, a lot of people don't realize that Mexico is a lot more diverse than you may realize. So think of travel to Mexico. Like you probably have a particular vision in your head. Maybe you're thinking of the beaches of Cancun, or maybe some Mexico City comes to mind, maybe Lucha Libre, something like that. But Mexico is a city is a country rather, I'm sorry, with tons of regions. And there's just as much diversity within Mexico as there is with the US. You wouldn't say that, for instance, a trip to Atlanta is going to be similar to a trip to California or to New York. There's so much regional diversity within Mexico. And in particular, even if you ask the Mexicans, Yucatan State is one of the most unique locations within Mexico. Now, I want to quickly explain what we're talking about, and I'll explain where the Yucatan is and all that. But I think if you're looking to visit, there are a couple of reasons why you want to come to the Yucatan. Most importantly is the culture. The Maya people, who are literally the descendants from the old Mayan civilization, are some of the kindest, nicest, most authentic people that you will ever meet. It's super safe. It's quite affordable. And there's a ton to do. Ancient Mayan ruins, thick jungle, these cenotes, which we'll talk about, these underground swimming holes that look like there's something out of an Indiana Jones movie, and incredible local gastronomy. Like the food here, if you think of Mexican food, like you can find that here. But the local food is largely something completely different, completely new to you, even if you think that you're familiar with the concept of quote unquote Mexican food. So I think like it's really just that it's such a unique region within Mexico. It really has a lot of its own flavors and colors and all that. And I think it's such a beautiful place. But we put it number one on our list for this year in large part because of the opening of the Maya train, which is a pretty remarkable thing that is, I'll go ahead and pull up on the screen for the folks who are on YouTube, but the map of the route. But if you go to first to a map of Mexico, Yucatan is, so there's the Yucatan Peninsula, which is this peninsula that kind of juts out into the Gulf of Mexico. And then there are several states that make that up, but one of them is the Yucatan state. So it's the state that we're talking about here, not the peninsula. And the Yucatan state is far less popular than the other state on the peninsula, which is Quintana Roo. So if you think of like the places in this part of Mexico that are popular, it's like Tulum, Playa del Carmen, Cancun, Cozumel, Isla Mujeres, all of that is in Quintana Roo. Quintana Roo is a state that has the Riviera Maya, absolutely gorgeous beaches, but a lot of tourism, a lot of resorts, a lot of all-inclusives, all of that. Once you cross over the state line into the Yucatan, it's a totally different world. Tourist numbers go way down historically. There are far fewer tourists here. It's much more, there still is very much that sense of local culture, that sense of the Maya people. And you'll find far fewer foreigners. But there's so much to do that there was this big project that the Mexican government has really been pushing on for the last few years. And they finally got it open called the Maya train. So the Maya train is a train that is meant to connect all of these places in quite a few different states, but in particular runs through the heart of the Yucatan. So you can now, it's up and running. I've never taken it. I'm going to take it next week when I go to Cancun for a few days before flying out of here. And it runs, you can just hop, it runs right to the airport. So you can hop on the train and you can take that into several of the destinations in the Yucatan. So that's why we had it number one on our list for 2024, specifically because of that train. But there's so much to offer. And it's really one of my favorite places on the planet.
Oh, that's so cool. And that's so convenient that you can just hop on that right from the airport. And I know that a lot of those destinations from the US that you can fly into the airport in Merida, right?
So to get to here, there's a couple different ways. So you can fly, the best way would be to fly directly to Merida Airport if you can, if you're not planning to go to Cancun. Now you can combine a trip to Yucatan with a trip to Cancun or Tulum, and many people do that. And oftentimes they just visit Chichen Itza, which are the famous Mayan ruins, and nothing else in the Yucatan. But if you're basing your trip around the Yucatan, you should come to Merida first. MID Airport, they've got direct flights from Miami, Houston, Orlando, which is the flight that I took to get here, Dallas, Fort Worth, and LAX. And you can also connect through Mexico City. Alternatively, you could fly to Cancun and take that Maya train.
So I want to know about these destinations that are the most special places, in your opinion.
Like where to go, yeah? Okay, so let me give you a brief overview. So there's one major city, which is Merida, where I am currently. It is actually the only true city in the entire peninsula. Quintana Roo doesn't have cities. There's not many people that are actually from Quintana Roo. Most of them live there, come from other parts of Mexico in order to work in the tourism industry. But Merida is a real city. I think it's more than 1 million people. It's a proper city. It's got a gorgeous historical Spanish colonial historic center with beautiful churches and lots of squares and all of it's so beautiful. It's so Instagram perfect with all the different colored buildings and everything. So Merida is definitely the starting point for most folks who are planning a trip. And it could just be your base because it's also strategically situated where you can just take day trips to much of the rest of the Yucatan. So one nice thing about visiting here is you can see a lot and only have to check into one hotel if that's what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, there are other ways, other things to do. You can go around, you can explore, move around between different towns. In addition to Merida, there are a number of beach towns. Now, the Yucatan beaches I'm not going to tell you that these are like the Maldives or anything like that. They're not the most beautiful beaches. And certainly you will find clearer water and warmer water on the Caribbean side, down in Tulum and Playa del Carmen and Cancun. However, you'll also find a lot of crowds. And you'll find a lot of seaweed. And you won't find that on the Gulf side as much. These beaches are largely empty. You're talking still pretty good sand. The water isn't as clear because it's like that Gulf water that has is a little bit darker.
Yeah.
But the sand, the beaches are huge. The sand is wonderful. If you just want to lay on the beaches, those are great. So you have all these beach towns: Celestún, Progreso, Rio Lagartos, and El Cuyo are 4 that I would recommend. And there's flamingos that move between Celestún and Rio Lagartos. So depending upon what time of the year you visit, go to one of those places and you'll see these huge flocks of flamingos. It's really beautiful.
That's
and
so
Rio
cool.
Lagartos, they also have, they're beautiful animals. And you can also see in Rio Lagartos, they have this pink lake. It's just these salt flats where they it's like an artificial thing. I don't understand the exact reason why it's pink. I forget. It's something to do with this process where they're basically extracting stuff out of the water, but it means that you can see literal pink water that just goes on forever. And it's a bit of an Instagram thing. It's interesting and worth seeing. But if you want a really quiet, dusty beach town where there's not many people near you, there's tons of that here. You also have the inland towns, and these are my favorite. These are small colonial towns that still have the Spanish colonial centers, but really have a small town vibe. In particular, Izamal, which is, they call it the yellow city because the entire city, all of it is yellow. All these Spanish colonial architecture, 100% yellow. Or my favorite, which is Valladolid, which is in the center of the Yucatan. And it's just a beautiful city that I could go more in depth about. And then I would say, in addition to that, those towns, the other main things to do here are the Mayan ruins. So you got the 3 big ones: Chichen Itza, Uxmal, and Balam, that are spread out across the state. And then you have cenotes, which are these underground swimming holes that you can find all over, no matter where you're going. And so that plus gastronomy, I would say, are how I would go about building a trip. Ruins, cenotes, gastronomy, culture. Those are the reasons to come. And I would base myself either in Merida or in Valladolid, or maybe in both, and then maybe a stop at one of the beach towns. That's what I would do.
No, it sounds fantastic. And especially because there aren't as many people as those super touristy destinations. which I think is what a lot of people look for, is places that feel a little bit more off the beaten path and not just like a resort town.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you want authentic culture, you can definitely find it here. If you can learn a little bit of Spanish, it helps. But there is a fair bit of English, actually. I'm surprised at how well English is spoken here. So I think most people could comfortably do a trip here. And there's a lot to see. Like I said, I think maybe we talk a bit about cenotes, because I think that's one of the most special things about Yucatan. So cenotes are these like underground sinkholes. And if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I went to a cenote outside of Tulum or Playa del Carmen. Yeah, you did, but they're not like these cenotes. These are a whole other level. The ones near Tulum and Playa del Carmen, because the water level on the aquifer is a lot lower, those are more like open air swimming holes, most of them. A few of them are in caves and stuff. Here, once you move inland, the difference between the level of where you are, like the ground level, and where the aquifer is, creates this like depth where it's 2, 3, 4 stories. And so you get these falls where you walk into this cave and you just picture all of these like roots of a tree, like coming down into this like little swimming hole that's buried inside of this cavern. And there are thousands of these things. They're everywhere in the Yucatan, everywhere. Like literally the Costco here has one in its parking lot.
Wow.
When I first stayed here, I stayed in an apartment, and across the way was a school. The basement of that school was a cenote. And yeah, I went and I visited and they let me. It had a bit of a smell to it, but they're all over the city. They build over them. They're private cenotes. The locals will sometimes have cenote parties if you're friends with cenote or something, which is super fun, instead of a pool party. And quite a lot of them are open to the public. Some of them have like little resorts almost built around them where you can go for the day. There's lockers, places to change, pools, restaurants often set up right next to them. Some of them will have hotels even connected to them. I can show you, see for the listeners on YouTube, I can go ahead and pull up one of my tabs here and show you some of the cenotes in Valladolid, which are really incredible. Like they have this one in particular called Cenote Sutun, which is super famous. It has a platform that they built out into the center of it. Let me scroll down here and show this one to you. Here we go. Here's Clara in Cenote Sutun.
Oh, wow.
So you can go and you can stand, for those who are listening to the podcast. It is, picture an underground cavern with stalactites or stalagmites, whichever one hangs from the top, hanging out over everywhere. And then in this like beautiful sort of tranquil pool in the middle is a platform they can walk out to. And just at the time that we visited, there was a little bit of water over it. So it was like ankle high water, and then stand in the middle for a photo. So that's that's all over Instagram. If you search Suytun, Suytun, you'll find that everywhere. But I've got pulled up here an article that I have about the best cenotes near Valladolid. Valladolid, I think, has some of the best ones, although you can also find them near Merida. And I see there's a photo of me inside of one of them. Some of them have like little adventure parks where you can take kayaks or zip lines. This one has this like waterfall. It's like a fake waterfall, Cenote Izamal, that falls into it. So while you're swimming, you have this like waterfall over you. It's such a really unique experience. And you can go cenote hopping, particularly if you have a rental car, which I would recommend if you can, and go to 2 or 3 in a day and stop over. And they're all different. They all have different, but they're super deep. And in fact, they're so deep that you can go diving in them. So if you're a diver, I'm not a diver. I have claustrophobia and stuff. So I'm not like super, super jazzed about going deep down into these things. But there's this whole network that connects them all underground. And you can go and you can dive into that and you can see it all. So it's really incredible. I think I've heard different theories about how cenotes were formed. But one of the theories that I think is reasonably likely is that it's related to the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs.
That's what I was reading about.
This area.
Yeah. Which I have no idea the science behind it, but it seems these aren't really anywhere else in the world, right? I mean,
I think it's something to do with the asteroid impacting the ground and changing the way that it, like in such a way. You do have swimming, like Texas has, some folks who live near Austin might say, oh, this looks like some of our swimming holes. And they are like this, but come to Yucatan and you'll see it. There's definitely something really special. So I think cenotes are worth, I would honestly say, build your whole trip around cenotes. You could just do a whole trip on that. Really? And it would be totally worth it.
And I
you
didn't even
know,
realize there were so many. I thought there were few and far between, but it seems like
thousands.
they're just everywhere. And so for those, are a bunch of them regulated, or can you just pick one on a map and go there, or do you have to pay to get in, or how does it
Oh, it
work?
totally, it's like anything. It's like the
It just
equivalent of a
depends.
pond. It just
Okay.
depends on who owns it. Some of them, most of the ones that you'll go to as a tourist are set up for tourists. They
Mhm.
charge admission and you go in and you pay $5 or something and they let you in. And depending on the cenote, there's different facilities and all that sort of stuff. And
Right.
so if you're in Valladolid, check out my article. I share the 12 best ones, although there's a lot more than that. And I really did try to share the ones that I would personally take people to. But they're constantly opening more. Like if you own land in Yucatan, it's quite a common thing for locals who own land. It's, oh, if you have a cenote, like you might have a business because you can
Wow.
just turn that cenote into something. And like I said, other people, I've been to private parties, private cenote parties, where we just happened, a friend of a friend knew somebody who owned a cenote and they throw a party with alcohol and all that stuff. Some of the cenotes will have a bar and stuff, but usually the swimming pool separate because obviously for safety reasons. Oftentimes at the more public ones, you have to wear life vests. They're pretty intense about that because they're
Oh, yeah.
crazy deep. Like you can just get lost. Once in a while, it does happen to people. You just get lost into the divers in particular, where it's like underground because they go into these incredible depths.
Do that with my claustrophobia.
I'm not a diver. I'm
No.
not a diver. I totally get why people do it. There's a whole other world underground. But the one reason I might try it in cenote is at least there aren't sharks because I am terrified of sharks. So
Oh, yeah.
when Leah Rose said like, oh, Lake Michigan, no
You're
sharks,
right.
that's totally a benefit for me. But that's my own thing.
On the topic of going and visiting these places and like occasionally having to pay for things, if someone's planning a trip to the Yucatan, how is affordability just as a whole when it comes to places to stay and transportation and getting into these incredible places?
One of the attractions of the Yucatan as a destination is that it is relatively affordable. Now, affordability is always a relative term, right? Like any sort of travel costs money. And like any trip, Yucatan can be as expensive or as cheap as you want it to be. If you want luxury hotels, you can spend a lot of money. If you want to eat out, particularly Merida has a lot of like high-end dining experiences, and that can cost a lot. But on the other hand, if it's very accessible on a budget, you can find hostels here for, I think probably around $20 a bed is what they're going for, maybe less than that. You can definitely find budget hotels for well under $50 a night. The cenotes, things like that, that's going to be like $5. If you're willing to eat street food, $3 a meal is going to get you most of what you need. And even if you want to eat at like a cheaper sit down restaurant, I think $10 is going to be plenty to cover your costs. There's some fees to get into the Mayan ruins. I think the biggest expense generally is it's helpful if you have a rental car to get around. It's not totally necessary, especially now that they have the Mayan train. You can get to all the ruins. You can get to the main cities that I mentioned via that or via the Adeo bus network. But to get to some of these cenotes, like definitely easier to have a rental car. And I think in general, better. But rental cars you can find for relatively cheap prices. And especially if you're coming with a family or with a group or a partner and you're splitting the cost, it may end up working out to be cheaper than paying for transport anyway. So I would say that's probably the one financial barrier apart from the flights. Flights to Merida tend to cost a little bit more because there's not as many of them. But now with the train, you can just fly Cancun. You can find super cheap flights. You can find under $100 flights from many places in the US. And then from there, it's a $50 ticket on the Mayan train and boom, you're in Mexico.
And I feel like usually the flights are the priciest part of any trip. So it's really just the getting there. And if you can find a great deal, it seems way more affordable. I can only speak for the US, but for the price of getting a meal and getting around, it seems like it's much more affordable than what we're used to here, at least what I'm used to here in Arizona.
Most places are more affordable than the US, which is one thing I'm constantly telling people on Travel Lemming. It's if you think travel is expensive, like that's largely a mindset thing.
I agree.
If you're from the United States, now there are obviously many other people from other countries, but you may find that your costs at the destination end up being less than it would have been had you stayed home. So it is just getting yourself there. You can find super cheap flights. So definitely one of the main attractions for coming here. Another attraction that I should definitely talk about are the ruins. So the Mayan civilization spanned this whole part of Mexico, and they left some really ginormous ruins. Probably the one that most people are familiar with is Chichen Itza, which has this like super famous step pyramid. That is one of the new 7 wonders of the world. And because of that, it's super popular. And most people tourists who have been to the Yucatan just take a tour from Cancun and they go to Chichen Itza and they come back and that's it. That's their only experience with it.
That's what I'm doing next month with my mom.
Are you? You're
Yeah.
going to Cancun. Are you going to go to Chichen Itza?
Yes, we already booked like a bus tour there, but unfortunately,
They'll take you there. They'll take you to the Ixtal cenote, maybe.
yes, that is the one that we're going to.
Yep, that's what they all go to. So it's
Yeah.
still worth doing, and you will enjoy it. But that is the traditional experience of the Yucatan. I would say come back if you can and spend
Of
some more
course.
time because you can also visit. I actually think of the three major ruins, Chichen Itza is my least favorite. It is super impressive. It is super interesting, but it's one main pyramid out in a clearing. There's also Balam, which is north of Valladolid on the road to Rio Lagartos. And that is more of a complex with more pyramids going on. And you can climb the pyramid there, which you cannot climb Chichen Itza. So one of the problems with Chichen Itza is you show up, it's really impressive. You take some photos and okay, maybe you get a tour guide to tell you some history, but it's there, you see it. Ekbalam, there's more to go around. There's a cenote in Ekbalam that you can visit. So it's a bit more of a destination. The other one, which is over past Merida, as you go west-southwest, is called Uxmal. And I think Uxmal is the prettiest one. It's really big. It doesn't have the steps of Chichen Itza, but it's a super impressive pyramid. And that one is one where you can go and there will be very few other people, even though it is almost as big as Chichen Itza. It's just quite a bit out of the way. It's about an hour from Merida. There's not a lot else around it. So again, if you have a rental car,
Yeah, it seems like the way to
awesome
go.
place. Highly recommend it. You can't come here without checking out some of the Maya ruins. The Mayan civilization was obviously super important to this. It lives on today through the Maya people who are the locals. So that, and then I guess the last thing I would say is just the gastronomy. The local food is really unique. All kinds of dishes that aren't what traditional Mexican food that people would think about. They have this culture of something called botanas, which is like snacks that you get when you go to a bar or something. You get a drink and they bring out like little, it's almost like tapas, but not quite like that. And they're like free, but they come, you order a round of drinks on.
Yeah.
And so it can be really fun to go around to the bars and the locals really do this. And you can find a ton of them in Merida or Valladolid. Botanas bars, just ask whatever hotel you're staying at where the local one is. And it's a really interesting way to see the culture. And lots of cochinita people, which is like this pork that people love. I'm vegetarian, so I'm like not the best to talk about this, but you should try it when you visit. Let me know what you think.
I will, yeah.
The food is definitely one of the main reasons to come here. And one, because it's affordable, so you can access a higher quality than you had before, but two, because it is such a unique set of like regional cuisines and stuff. And so if you are into the food and you want to visit the Yucatan, I am not the best person to talk about that, but one of my friends who's also a blogger, Foodie Flashpacker, is the expert on this stuff. He has eaten his way through every single thing you can find in the Yucatan. He's actually running a food tour to the Yucatan. So you can take that. If you want to, we'll put a link in the show notes. And he's basically taking people through a luxury tour of the Yucatan's culinary secrets. And so we'll put a link to that. Yeah, it's definitely a higher end tour, but they've got, and they'll also go to all the ruins and the yellow city of Izamal and all these things that we've talked about today.
Oh, wow.
And even if that's not even if the tour's not on your list, he does have quite a number of articles on the Yucatan. So I would reference folks there because otherwise, as a vegetarian, I start talking too much about meat dishes and people are like, what are you talking about?
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think food for me is like the reason I want to travel. And it's also why like I have this misconception that northern Mexican food right next to Arizona is like all that Mexico has. And so now I'm like, oh my God, there's such a different cuisine in the Yucatan and like way down south that I've never even tried before.
Yeah, it's a whole other. You've got, if you've been to Mexico, like this is when people say like they've done Mexico, it's like you've done one part of Mexico.
Right.
And
Yeah.
even like I said, I've been almost 2 years and there's still places I haven't been.
Yeah, there's always more to explore. I would love to know when I should visit. What's the best time of year?
Yeah, I think so. The best time's definitely between December and April. You want to go, we're talking the jungle. This is the jungle.
It's hot.
And yeah, and you really want to try to come if you can during the winter months. It's a great, December and January are probably the best, into February. And then in March, you start to get some spring breakers. So the crowds start to pick up, but the weather is still good. Much later than that, it starts to get hot and humid. And then the summers, I would strongly recommend avoiding. It's hot, it's humid. Like you're talking like weather that easily gets into the mid 30s. I live life in Celsius. So what's that in Fahrenheit? Like 100 and something.
That's like 100. It's
Yeah.
hot. And with the humidity, it's like unlivable. You feel like you can't breathe.
Yeah. And the sun really beats down. And even right now, so right now it's October when we're recording this. We'll probably release this later, but it is still a bit it's really hot in the middle of the day. So I just avoid going out in the middle of the day. It's fine in the evening, and I'm used to it because I spend a lot of time in tropical weathers. I like tropical weather, but I would say October start, which this is about the start of the time that I would recommend people come. But if you can, December through March, April, that's the best time to go for sure.
Cooler months for sure. I want to get into safety. I know a lot of people think, or at least talk about Mexico with an air of, oh, it's not safe. So I want to know what you think about how safety is, whether it's for solo travelers or just really anyone who's looking to travel to the Yucatan, how you feel safe-wise.
Yeah. So first, let's address safety in Mexico broadly. Again, Mexico's a big country, lots of different places. So we'll talk about regional differences here in a minute. I think that some of the safety concerns around Mexico are perfectly legitimate. Safety should be a legitimate concern anywhere that you go. I do think that it is, particularly in the US, overhyped on account of the media and it starts to get into politics, which we won't talk about as much, but it definitely is the case that bad things happen everywhere, including the United States. Those things tend to find their way onto the news in the United States more in a way that maybe would give you a disproportionate sense of what's actually happening. In general, most of Mexico is pretty safe. I wouldn't say it's the safest destination. I wouldn't say anywhere in Latin America is like the safest destination apart from maybe Costa Rica, but it is generally relatively safe. Now, there are some places that the United States has like a do not travel, like level 3, and I think even 4 warnings for. Most of those are places you're not going to go. Like they're up in the sort of the north central part of the country where there's like cartels and stuff. And you're just probably not going to go there. Like most of the places that we're talking about are safe. And in general, I think Mexico gets a bad rap on safety. So I'll say that as a preface. But if you're still like, I don't care, I'm not messing around with my safety, Nate, let me tell you, the Yucatan is where you should go. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a map here on the screen this is a homicide map of Mexico homicides. And bear in mind, of course, this happens everywhere. But if you look at this map, it is noticeable how the Yucatan here in the corner has far fewer, like by a factor of 10 than the rest of the country. And that is because this is like the safest part of Mexico. Merida in particular is consistently ranked as the safest city in Mexico. And in fact, one of the safest cities in all of North America. And that's another point. I want to pull up this article from Colby Holiday for Fodor's Travel. And the title is, As a Black Woman, I Feel Safer Living in Mexico Than I Do in the US. And she's talking about living in Merida. And she runs through the stats and stuff. And it's in the US, shootings are fairly common. And I honestly, frankly, agree with this because I think that the least safe I have felt in my travels has been in some places in the United States. And I've traveled over 80 countries. But Merida is super safe, which is really the key point for this. Like it is as safe as it comes, like by the numbers. It is one of the safest places that you can possibly go. I will walk around this city at night all the time. And I have not once felt unsafe in any way, shape, or form. And I remember when I lived here 7 years ago, I left my door open for an entire day on the street, wide open into my place, my computer sitting right on the table the whole bit. It had swung open and come back. I'm like, what the heck? Nobody took anything.
Wow.
Even though probably hundreds of people walked past. So I really do think if you're on the fence about travel to Mexico because of safety concerns, I would say in general, I think those are probably overblown. You could probably make it work. But Yucatan, Merida in particular, is the place for you. It is safer than the United States. I can say that quite confidently.
Yeah, I think people all the time just get an idea in their head, or it's the first thing that they hear about a country, and then they think the entire country is unsafe. And you can tell from that map that you just pulled up, it gets pretty colorful and dense around like Mexico City. But yeah, where you are, it seems like it's just way, way different.
And Mexico City is safe too, by the way. Some of that's just population, right? Like you get any large city is going to have a higher number of folks, but yeah, it's in general, I would highly recommend it.
Good. That's great to know.
Yep.
Do you have any other tips just to wrap up talking about the Yucatan?
I think just go. There's a reason we put it on our list for 2024. This Maya train is great. The locals are really excited because it'll hopefully bring some money to their economy, but it's going to bring more tourists and it's going to mean that it's going to get more expensive and it's going to come now while it's still is this relatively untouched, less discovered place. I don't think you're going to regret it. It's a great place to go. If you can, rent a car. That's the one tip I said. You don't have to, but if you can, I think it definitely helps make it better. Learn a few words of Spanish as always.
Yeah.
All right. So before we wrap up, I want to tell you briefly about Travel Lemming. Travel Lemming is an online travel guide. We have over 1,500 guides to destinations all around the world. And it's not just me, it's not just Betty. We have dozens of locals who write guides from the perspectives of being a local or being an expert on a destination. These guides can really help you to find the best places to stay, the best things to do, and help you plan your entire trip. We've got guides to destinations all over the world. We also have meetups. So if you're in one of our 7 meetup cities, you can come and you can meet us. So go to travellemming.com, scroll down, and you'll see those meetup cities. We've got them in Seattle, Denver, Chicago, Phoenix, Vancouver, Canada, San Juan, and we're about to add one in San Francisco. We'd love to see you at one of those meetups. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're planning to go, we've got something for you on Travel Lemming. We want to be the travel site for people who love travel, and we want this to be the podcast for people who love travel. So please be sure to let us know what you thought of the podcast. Leave us a comment. Let us know what segments you like, what we should bring back, what your thoughts on that. And if you've enjoyed this, please give us a like and subscribe. We really appreciate you listening to us. This is our second podcast, so we're definitely appreciate the feedback. We're still going through some growing pains. We hope that Travel Lemming can really be a resource for you, and we're here to help serve you. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today. We really want to hear your feedback on the show. And if you have any questions about Mexico or any place outside of that, we would love to hear your thoughts, concerns, questions, everything. Make sure you check out Travel Lemming. We've got some amazing perspectives. They're coming out all the time from our wonderful team of writers, as well as some really thorough travel guides. That's all we got for you today. Until next time, safe travels, and we will see you soon.